Hello, lovely book dragons, and welcome back to another video. Today, as you see, I'm not alone, and this is like the most exciting. Okay, this is Sophia, and I've been gushing about her channel for a long time now, and she has agreed to film this video with me. So, hey, Sophia, welcome to the channel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Sophia. I'm from the channel Sophia's Thoughts. I've been doing BookTube for maybe around 2.5 years now, I think. And like Joanna, I mostly read fantasy and big Sanderson fan. But aside from Sanderson, one of my favorite fantasy authors is Maria Snyder. She wrote the Chronicles of Ixia series, which is probably my favorite series ever. And then outside of fantasy, I'm a really big fan of Lauren James in sci-fi and Alice Oseman in contemporary.
Right. And you also loved The House in the Cerulean Sea, right?
I did, yes. It was one of my favourite books from last year, only narrowly beat out by Sanderson's Rhythm of War, but that was
Wow.
really impossible to beat last year, so
I know. Yeah, I picked it up because of you, and it ended up being on my top 10 as well. So
oh, that's
it's
good.
such a
It's
good
a
book.
really sweet story.
Yeah, completely different from Rhythm of War, I guess, but really, really good.
Just a bit.
Just a little bit. I mean, in case you don't want to read Sanderson, guys, go read House in the Cerulean Sea. But today we're actually here to do the next installment in the Cosmere Unbounded series. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will redirect you to the very first video that I put out a couple of weeks ago with a reading schedule and the comprehensive, I hope, list of everything that he has published. I think that since then he probably already published 5 novels because he's that quick, but maybe not, maybe not. So it has all the books and how we're going to be reading them. We're going to start in March with The Final Empire. So if you want to read Brandon Sanderson, this is the occasion. They are going to be talking about what is the Cosmere. Everyone talks about this Cosmere. What is this thing? How do things interconnect? Do you have to read it? Why should you read it? And so that's what we're going to be doing today. We're not going to go in depth with anything because we will be doing more in-depth videos about different topics. So today we're going to start with what is the Cosmere. So, Sophia, can you tell us a little bit about what the Cosmere is, just in a few words here?
Yeah, sure. So, the Cosmere is a universe that has been created by Brandon Sanderson, in which some or most of his books are set, and all of his books or series take place on a different planet within this universe called the Cosmere.
Exactly. That is. Thank you. So the Cosmere, like she said, is a universe with different planets that are interconnected, and that also means that there are some people that travel in between planets, right? So you can see someone in one planet, and then in another book you see them again, but they tend to change names in the meantime. So you actually don't always recognize them. That's the fun part. Something that the Cosmere shares is underlying rules of magic. Do you know a little bit about it, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically it all started with the shattering of Adenalcium. And we don't know too much about that yet because that is something we're going to learn more about in books that haven't even been written yet and probably won't be written for quite a few years. I think that they're like at least 10 years in the future. So we'll have to wait for that.
Yeah.
But Adenalcium was shattered into these shards, and these shards were kind of inhabited by people who are now what essentially boils down to gods of the various planets within the Cosmere, and each of these shards manifests magic in a very specific and special way, let me say that.
And so, to just help out, so does this mean that a shard belongs to a planet, or can they also go from one planet to another?
Also move from planet to planet, so
All right.
it's real tricky.
Do you know where all the shards are right now? Because
No.
I'm not that much of a nerd. Okay.
No, I have no idea. I have no idea. And I think he kind of wants it that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I think so too. But I've tried to see, okay, I think this and this is there, but before Rhythm of War, we didn't even have all the names of the shards. So Now you need to read Rhythm of War, so you have a lot of reading to do before you figure all this out. But yes, that's pretty much it. So these shards give people power, and they're kind of like the gods of these planets. Exactly. So there's something called realms also. Could you explain a little bit about the realms? So there's 3 realms: the physical, the cognitive, and the spiritual. So do you know just a tiny bit about each realm to help people who are getting into Sanderson? Like, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, you won't need to know too much about it until really you start getting into Stormlight, where, I mean, the Cosmere opens way up in the Stormlight books anyway, but there are, as you said, three realms. So the physical realm is kind of, as the name suggests, it's basically the world that the same as the world that we live in, where people live and everything is normal. Cosmere normal. Not Earth normal, Cosmere normal.
That would be so boring.
Yeah. And then there's the cognitive realm, which again is kind of like what you would think it is, but it's almost where you could say magic lives. And even though magic in the various worlds of the Cosmere manifests in the physical realm in various special ways, depending on which planet you're on, the magic source really is in the cognitive realm. And it is possible to travel there, but I won't say too much about that.
So
And
exciting.
then there's the spiritual realm, which actually we don't know too much about just yet, but that might be where the shards are. That is that spooky enough? Let me stop. I won't say any more than that.
I'm happy you're here because this is so exciting. So I have a question for you. How do you travel, like through these realms, or how do you get to other planets? Do we know that?
We haven't seen it happen on page yet, but as you said, we know that traveling happens because, and this is not a spoiler, there is one character named Hoyd who tends to pop up in every single Sanderson book, and we
Tends to.
know, well, does. And so we know that he's a world hopper, but we do kind of start to find out how travel happens in later books in the Stormlight archive. So I'm not going to say how, but you do find out. You find out, I think you find out in kind of Oathbringer, and it's sort of more so confirmed in the Rhythm of War. But you will, if you're reading the Cosmere now, you will see Hoyd quite a bit. And I mean, this is kind of off topic, but it's interesting because he's like almost Sanderson's first idea within the Cosmere, because when he was a kid, he used to imagine himself in all of the fantasy books he was reading, and he was like, how cool would it be to have a character just pops up in all of the books? And so that's Hoyd.
And so Hoyd, we don't have a book dedicated to him yet, but it is planned, right? It's called Dragonsteel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So I think that he wrote a first draft of it. I think he said that, but he's like the same as Way of Kings Prime, where he wrote it originally and actually he's going to scrap it and start again. But I don't think he's planning on writing Dragonsteel until after book 10 of Stormlight. So we've got a long wait for that.
You have to protect him at all costs so that he finishes all these books.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm really hoping that he actually has this all written down somewhere so that it could be like a Robert Jordan, Brandon Sanderson thing if necessary. I mean, hopefully that doesn't need to happen, but
exactly. Yeah. He's still quite young, so
yeah, exactly.
Should be good. Okay, so that's kind of like a first quick overview of what is the Cosmere. We have the planets, we have the shards that you mentioned, we have the realms, we have a little bit of the magic system. So can you tell us a little bit about how everything is related in the Cosmere?
Oh, how to do this without spoilers is the question, isn't it? So they're obviously all of the planets take place. Planets take place? No, the books take place on different planets, and all of the planets are in the Cosmere. So we know that they're in the same universe, and we know because Sanderson has told us that it's all going to come together somehow in the end. But we also have kind of different timelines as well. So I think in terms of the history of the Cosmere, I'm pretty sure that he said that Mistborn Era 1 is the first kind of time-wise that happens. And we know, for various reasons that I won't say, that Stormlight 4 that has just come out is definitely after Mistborn Era 1. And we also know that Warbreaker happens before, at least before Words of Radiance, which is Stormlight Book 2. And it probably happens quite a long time before Words of Radiance, but I think it's still after Mistborn Era 1. So you've got all of these kind of different timelines at play, and then you know that there's going to be characters that potentially are going to pop up somewhere that you wouldn't normally expect them. And then, of course, there's the shards that tie it all together and are the gods, as it were, of the Cosmere, and they know about each other. And there are some that are not necessarily good guys, and they maybe want what they don't have. So I don't think I can say any more than that without spoiling. I'm trying to be vague.
Exactly. And this is to help people that are a little bit intimidated, right, by the Cosmere. So you're talking about all these different things, and the question I'm sure everyone is asking themselves is, do I need to read everything to understand what you're saying? Like, do I need to remember all these things that you just mentioned to enjoy these books?
Definitely not. And I think because the Cosmere is so vast, I mean, I can't even, off the top of my head, we've probably got at least 12 books. We've got 3 in Era 1 Mistborn, 3 in Era 2, so that's 6. And then there's Elantris and Warbreaker, which are the standalones currently. Those will have sequels eventually. So that's 8. And then we've got the 4 Stormlight books, which is 12. And then there are also tons of novellas and short stories and things like that. So it's quite vast. And I think what's nice about that is it means that you can pick what sounds good to you and just read that. And it doesn't matter what you read and what you decide not to read. I mean, of course, don't pick up Mistborn book 3 first. You still want to read the individual series in order. But aside from that, you don't have to read everything. They all stand on their own. It's kind of, I always describe it that it's kind of like the Marvel universe. Like, you don't have to watch the other films. If you do, you might pick up on Easter eggs and things that are laid out for you. But you can watch Thor and not watch Iron Man, and it's fine. So it's kind of like that.
So do you think that Rhythm of War is kind of like Infinity War, where if you haven't watched all the individual superhero movies, that you would miss out on something? Or do you think that it's totally fine to read Stormlight without reading anything else before and just, you know, start with Way of Kings? I mean, I would recommend starting with Way of Kings if you're new to fantasy in general. But if you want to read Sanderson and you're like, this is the only series I care about, could you do that technically and not miss out on a lot?
You could, yeah. I mean, I think in that example, that's a really good example. So it's like the Stormlight Archive is like the actual Avengers films.
Yeah.
So, you know, most of the Easter eggs are going to be in there, and especially Rhythm of War. There are so many Cosmere Easter eggs in there. I mean, even I didn't pick up on most of them, and I've read everything in the Cosmere. So if you haven't read everything in the Cosmere, it really doesn't matter. You can still enjoy the books. It's just if you're a bit of a Cosmere nerd like me, you'll read it. You'll read one book and then you'll be like, I want it all.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just pick and choose. I must read everything
Right.
multiple times. So, but you don't have to, is the point.
Yeah, for sure. And so we actually have a reading order, right, for this Cosmere Unbounded project. But you actually had a video that I will leave linked in the cards where you give your own preferred reading order. So, for example, if someone says, okay, I really want to get into Sanderson, but Stormlight, too intimidating. Mistborn could be intimidating, right? Because each book is like at least 600 pages. So where would you recommend someone who's a little bit scared of Sanderson to start?
I think if you want something standalone, then of course you've got Warbreaker and you've got Elantris. And I think from that, you have to decide what kind of vibe you want. So Elantris was his first published novel. Now, I mean, I think it was like the 13th book or something that he wrote, so it's still very good. Like it's not like a crappy debut novel or something. Not that any debut novel is crappy, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But that is his first published work, so it's a little less kind of polished than some of his newer books. And that one, there's more of a focus on political maneuverings, and there's a teeny tiny bit of romance. I mean, Sanderson's not the best at romance, so keep that in mind. But there's a little bit, and so that's Elantris. Whereas Warbreaker is a little bit more comical, I would say, and it has got political maneuverings, but actually it's got more of a kind of mystery type plot line. And then also Elantris has two main perspectives and Warbreaker has three main perspectives. So I would start with one of those, but if you're just getting into Sanderson and the Cosmere, pick whichever one sounds more fun to you. That's what I would suggest.
Right. I haven't read Elantris yet, but I think you really enjoy it, right? Because most people don't enjoy it as much as I think you do.
No, I think it is really underrated. I mean, I say that. Most people who love Sanderson and the Cosmere give everything 5 stars anyway.
It's true.
It's like, well, you know, I didn't like Elantris as much as everything else, but I still gave it 5 stars. So, you know, it's all relative. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I like the two main characters of Serene and Raoden, and I really like both of them. And I think the reason I like it more than Warbreaker is because in Warbreaker you have the 3 perspectives. So you have Ravenna, Ciri, and Lightsong. And the first time I read it, I wasn't really a fan of Vivenna. She kind of grated on my nerves a little bit. I liked her better on reread, but the first time I was like,
come on, I had the same.
Come on, girl, what are you doing?
Every time we switched to her chapters, I was like, oh, no.
Yeah, like take me back to Lightsong, please.
I know, he's the best.
Yeah. But so yeah, I really enjoy Elantris, and I think like Jessie from the Bookish Mom did a video about Elantris the other day. She did a review of it, and she described it as fantasy zombies, which is that's exactly what it is. And so if you like that, then that's your book.
Go for it. Yeah, I think that when I read Warbreaker, I wasn't expecting it to be so fun. And even though I always hear Elliot from Elliot Brooks mention that it's a super fun book, I was like, but it's Sanderson, right? So can it be fun? It's super fun. So I think if you want fantasy zombies, you go for Elantris. If you want fantasy epicness, you go for Stormlight, but I wouldn't recommend starting there. Then you have Mistborn, which is just great. It's a heist. The first book is a heist story. And then you have a really fun book with also a good romance, actually, in that one, and that would be Warbreaker.
Yeah, I like the romance in Warbreaker as well.
Yeah, me too. I felt really attached to it, which I wasn't expecting from Sanderson because he's not known for writing the best romance. All right, so
possibly that one works because we don't actually spend that much time with it.
You know what? That is true. I agree. Well, There might be a second book, you said, right? In
Yeah.
Warbreaker. So
Yeah.
for now, it's a standalone.
It's a standalone, but book 2 is going to be called Nightblood. And if anybody who's watching this has happened to read Warbreaker, that should make you very excited.
Oh yeah, I cannot wait for that book. When I saw the title, I was like, oh, yes, yes. The nerd. So you were talking, this is a perfect transition for my next question. We talked about what it is. How is the Cosmere today, but how big will it be? What can we expect in the future of the Cosmere? Is it all the same tone? Are there already advancements in the future? As you said, that there's different timelines, so could we expect space? Could we expect something like that? So what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's already basically announced most of what he wants to do with the Cosmere. So right now we have Mistborn Era 1, which is a complete trilogy. And then we have the bridge book between Mistborn Era 1 and 2, which is the Alloy of Law. And then we have the first 2 books in Mistborn Era 2. And book 3, I think he said, is hopefully going to be coming out next year. So Mistborn Era 2 should be finishing in 2022, hopefully. And then we're going to have 2 more eras of Mistborn.
Mistborn, yeah.
So there's one that Mistborn Era 3 is going to be like kind of modern day style of fantasy. So urban fantasy, I'm getting. And well, not urban fantasy because it's still going to
More
be
modern,
in
yeah.
Gabriel, but that kind of feeling. And then Mistborn Era 4 is going to be sci-fantasy, so science fiction fantasy in space. So I'm guessing there's going to be some interplanetary travel in the
That is so
Cosmere.
exciting.
So I'm really, really excited for that. I think that's going to be really cool. And then Stormlight, we have the first 4 books now, but it's going to be a 10-book arc. And there's actually going to be 2 story arcs within that 10-book series. So the first, I guess if we call it first era Stormlight, is books 1 to 5. And then there will be a 10 to 15 year in world gap, not a 10 to 15 year gap between the books. I think yeah, he's planning to take about 3 to 5 years in between finishing Stormlight 5 and starting Stormlight 6. And then Stormlight 6 to 10 will happen. And then I think eventually he's planning on having both Elantris and Warbreaker be a trilogy. And then, of course, there are the Dragonsteel books as well, which are to come, which are the ones you mentioned earlier, that will be about the world hoppers themselves. And I don't know how many books that's going to be. I think he said originally 3, but
I mean,
with Sanderson, who knows? Could be
yeah,
another
3,000 page books.
Yeah. So yeah, we've got a long way to go still in Cosmere.
So this is not close to being done.
Mm-mm.
And so you mentioned Mistborn Era 1 and 2, and just for people who don't know at all, how far apart are they? And is the tone of the second era a little bit different than the first era?
Yeah, for sure. So you can kind of look at Mistborn Era 1 as, our equivalent of like legends and mythology that we have. That's kind of like what Mistborn Era 1 is for the world of Scadrial. So it's like the start of their mythology, their religions, the types of magic are kind of established in Mistborn Era 1. There's other stuff that's established in Mistborn Era 1 that I won't say, but it's all very kind of, it's the history of Scadrial, but it's really cool because you get to see it happen. And then you move into Mistborn Era 2, which is kind of Western style theme. So it's flintlock fantasy. So there's guns and all that kind of stuff. And it's much more humorous in tone overall. Mistborn Era 1 does feel quite desolate a lot of the time. it's definitely got a darker tone to it overall. And Mistborn Era 2 is much more humorous and light. And there's still a lot of interesting stuff that's going on, but it's definitely not as grim as Era 1 is. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the first sentence of Mistborn is ash fell from the sky, so it cannot be very happy.
No, exactly.
I mean, how nerdy are we that we know these things?
Well,
it's a very iconic first line, right? Oh, I just love fans of Sanderson because we're so nerdy about everything. Well, some people are really intense and they know everything, right? Like, how do you not know this? But I just have one of my best friends and she's also into Sanderson. And there was something she didn't know about Rhythm of War. And then she got the spoiler in the 17 Shard podcast, the latest one. And she didn't know about a certain connection. And then she started yelling at me like, how did I not know this? And it's just so exciting.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much in Rhythm of War that it would just be so easy to not pick up on every little thing, especially like because there are links to even like his really, really short novellas, like Sixth of the Dusk.
Right. Who's read Sixth of the Dusk?
Well, I have, but I've read everything in the Cosmere. I wasn't kidding when I said, give it me all. But you know, it's I mean, I can't even imagine what it must be like to live in Sanderson's brain.
I know.
Like, it's wild.
I know. I was listening to the said podcast that he was talking about, and apparently his family doesn't allow him to bring his laptop on family retreats, and so he still has a notebook, and so he has a lot of outlines just written on paper because he gets inspiration whenever, right? And so he just said, "Yeah, everything's on paper, so I hope I never lose those papers or something like that." It's like, yes, you better not. The man, like his brain.
I hope that they're in a safe.
Like... Yes, somewhere very safe. Waterproof, fireproof, everything proof.
Yeah. Way
So we're talking about how awesome it is. And so for people who are still reticent, who still are like, should I read it? Should I not? Why should people read the Cosmere?
Why should you read the Cosmere? Well, if you are a seasoned fantasy reader, then there are a number of reasons why you should read it. There are, in my opinion, really great characters and really great worlds, and the magic systems are fantastic. And if you're not a seasoned fantasy reader, I think that there's still a way into fantasy through Sanderson's books, because he doesn't have a super either literary or super polished even writing style. His writing style is very simple, straightforward, and accessible, I think. So if you're not used to reading epic fantasy, I think that Sanderson is actually a really good place to start with either fantasy or epic fantasy, because you've got that more digestible writing style that is easier for you to read. And then you're also still benefiting from all the things that the fantasy readers love, which is the great characters, the interesting world building, the fun magic systems. And I think in particular, especially with Mistborn, he's really good at explaining the magic systems, even though they're complicated, in a way that's really easy to understand. So you get to enjoy all of that stuff without having to be super confused all the time, which can happen with some fantasy books. But I mean, still don't start with Stormlight, because you will be confused.
I agree. Especially when you hit the interludes and like, what is happening? The first time I read the interludes, I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with fantasy, there's kind of this expectation that you're going to go in and probably around the first 15 to 20% of the book, you're going to be a little bit like, what's the bigger picture? What does all of this mean? The thing with the Stormlight book is the first 15 to 20% is like 200 pages. It's like a lot more.
I know. A lot of people always say, if it takes 200 pages to set up, that's too much. I'm like, but it is 1,200 pages. I mean,
yeah, that's it. Exactly.
If you have a 300-page book, of course, it's going to be a lot faster than here. But yeah, I agree. And what you said is, I think something that I love about him is that, so I'm not a native English speaker, and I read his fantasy books. He was one of the first epic fantasy authors I read. And I was really intimidated because the size of the books, and it's a hard magic system. So for those who don't know what that means, it means there's really strict rules and regulations on how you use the magic. So not like Harry Potter where you have a wand and you can just cast a spell. But I was really scared. And then I was like, and if the writing is intimidating, because the first ever, I think, epic fantasy I read was Name of the Wind. And that is something, right, for someone who doesn't speak English all the time. And Sanderson is really accessible. Like his writing style is very straightforward. Some people say that he doesn't have a writing style. And I just love the way, even though there are 600 pages or more, you can fly through them because, like you said, the characters, the world, the magic, everything's so interesting, and you're not being bogged down by a heavy writing style.
Absolutely. And you can also listen to the audiobooks. And if you listen to the Michael Kramer, Kate Redding audiobooks, they're absolutely fantastic as well. Michael Kramer and Kate Redding are just amazing.
I listened to Rhythm of War when it came out. So I had everything pre-ordered, the ebook, the audiobook, and the hardcover. And of course, the ebook and audiobook were available immediately. And so I did that. And that was the best combination ever. Like, it's incredible. The voices they make, definitely recommend the audiobooks. They're amazing. But it's a bit hard sometimes to listen to an audiobook, just a fantasy audiobook, because you can lose some details. But if you're used to audiobooks, I mean, I think that's okay.
Yeah. I quite like listening and following along.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time, I feel that's really immersive, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, that is also my favorite way of reading. Super immersive. So these were the questions I had for you, but I want to ask you like a few personal questions about the Cosmere. So the first question I want to ask you is, what is your favorite Cosmere novel?
That's evil.
I know. I didn't let you prepare for this.
Well, I mean, I think it has to be Rhythm of War. Now, I think my answer would have been different 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I probably would have said either Well of Ascension or Elantris or Way of Kings.
Or, you know.
But now I'm pretty sure it's a Rhythm of War.
I think mine at the moment, it's so good, isn't it? For me, at the moment, I think it's a tie between Rhythm of War and The Hero of Ages, I think. Because The Hero of Ages really destroyed me. Yeah, I stared at my wall for a long time after finishing that.
Yes, yeah. If anyone is in Mistborn Era 1, prepare yourself.
Yeah, if you're participating in the read-along that starts in March, prepare yourselves. That's all we're going to say.
Yeah.
So, and who would be maybe your favorite Cosmic character?
Well, it is a Stormlight character.
Okay.
Anyway. It's Kaladin.
Yeah.
No question. Like, definitely Kaladin. He's just such a tortured little cinnamon roll.
No, I love him so much.
Me too.
Everyone fights over Kaladin.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody does. I mean, I was in the World Hoppers chat about favorite characters, and I was lucky enough to answer that question first. I was like, I get to say Kaladin first.
You called dibs. I know, I love Kaladin. I think for me it's a tie. Well, not a tie. I mean, Kaladin is like number one, and then the second one is Vin. I just love Vin.
Same. I love
her so much. In the beginning, you know, she's pretty much. So we're gonna start reading The Final Empire here in a month. So I guess we can do a little intro for that. And in that book, you follow Vin, who's a street urchin, and then she has trust issues. And I was watching the World Hoppers video that came out yesterday. So when we're filming this yesterday. And they were saying that it's a little bit annoying because she's always, maybe this person's going to betray me. When are they going to betray me? But it's so well done. It's so realistic. And what's what you said earlier. He writes characters that are so believable and so you can just attach to them. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is telling that we like the damaged characters the best because I think probably Kaladin and Vin are his most damaged characters.
Yeah.
And I love them both.
Yeah. And Shallan is pretty bad in terms of damage.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most of his characters are they've got a lot of baggage, shall we
Yeah.
say. Yeah,
I
I think
know.
probably that's the other thing about Elantris is that those are the least damaged characters. Like, if you want characters that are pretty okay mentally and they're not really struggling with too much apart from what's happening in the actual book, then Elantris is where you want to go because it's a lot less like damaged overall.
Yeah.
So many ways, but yeah, for sure he's good at writing characters with interesting backstories and a lot of dynamic characters in his series, I think.
Yeah, and I love that he actually tries to study. So he tries to include representation that he doesn't have. So one of his characters is in a wheelchair, and he actually talks to people in wheelchairs to know, hey, what's it like? What's your experience like? And I really appreciate that because he really cares. He doesn't just do it because it's a token something. He cares,
Yeah.
and I love that about him.
Yeah, I think that he had quadriplegic sensitivity readers
Right.
for the books where that character is present. So I think that's really good. And he had sensitivity readers for Shallan's situation as well. I won't go into the detail of that because I don't want to spoil anything, but he's really good at getting sensitivity readers because he freely admits, like, I don't have any mental health conditions. But
Lucky him.
I think yeah, I know, right? Like, imagine.
What?
This is why he can create all these incredible worlds, because he's not dealing with a load of baggage. Like, it's kind of the thing. But you know, he writes, like, for example, depression. He writes it so well. It's like he completely understands it, even though he's never experienced it. So
yeah, and I heard him, I don't want to spoil the character or anything, but he wrote certain characters in a certain way, but he didn't know why, right? So he was saying that they just felt like that, they felt right. And then he went on Twitter and he saw some people say, hey, the way he wrote his character, it could mean this and this. And then he's like, oh, yeah. It didn't faze him because it wasn't something. So it was about the LGBT community. That's the only thing I'll say, because he isn't LGBT himself. He doesn't identify, but he didn't even realize that this character was LGBT. He's like, oh yeah, now it all makes sense why I had to write them like this. And I really like that.
Yeah. And then once he realizes that, he'll go away and get input from others to make sure that he does it justice.
Yeah.
When he writes future books as well.
I know, it's incredible. I love it. Well, now we've gushed for almost 40 minutes about Sanderson and the Cosmere. We could go on for another 2 hours, I'm sure. Is there something you would like to add for first-time readers, for people who are getting into the Cosmere and who are still a little bit intimidated after this?
I think just don't be scared. If it sounds like something interesting to you, then give it a go. And if you don't like it, then that's fine. You can DNF it, and it's no harm, no foul. You know, there's so much in the Cosmere as well that if you start somewhere and that doesn't work for you, you can easily move to something else with a completely different tone, and it's not going to do you any disservice in reading the books. So just, if it sounds interesting, give it a try. And you never know, you might become a Sander fan like us.
Yeah. And something I think, since we're starting with the Final Empire, it's where I started, and I only read the Final Empire like 3 times before I actually continued with the series, because that first book is kind of self-contained enough that if you didn't like it, you don't have to continue on.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's really good at doing that, especially with the first books in series. You can kind of just read them, and then if that's all you want, then that's fine, and you move on to your next book by a different author in a different series. Do whatever you want to do, but you don't. I mean, I'm not going to say that this is the case for all of his books, but you don't usually end up on a cliffhanger type situation at the end of his books. They're pretty self-contained mostly. Especially,
like you said, the first books. If then you don't want to continue on. But I think once you read the second book in every one of his series, you're like, gotta read the next. So
yeah. Well, I think The Way of Kings is probably the exception to that, because I feel like even though it is self-contained enough that you could read it on its own, I struggle to imagine anyone getting to the end of Way of Kings and going, "Yep, that was good. I'm done now."
Yeah.
Like,
No, that's where everything starts. You're like, what? I need
if you're anything like me, you're going to want to pick up Words of Radiance immediately.
That is one of the best books he's written, I think, still. I love that book. So one last thing, actually, that I just remembered as you were talking is this term coined called Sanderlanche. Can you quickly explain to our first-time readers what a Sanderlanche is?
Yeah, so Brandon Sanderson does this thing where his books are plodding along nicely. They're pretty well paced. Everything's happening. You're like, this is good. And then you hit a certain point, usually around, again, 15 to 20% before the end of the book, and everything just starts going at like 50,000 miles per hour. And it's all downhill. And you're like, what is happening? Oh my goodness. And then you get to the end and you feel exhausted.
Yeah.
So that's the Sanderlanche.
Exactly. So when you read Sanderson, try to leave the last 15-20% for a one sitting thing, because you won't be able to put it down.
Yeah, I made that mistake I didn't know about the Sanderlanche until after I read The Final Empire, which was my first book, and not my first book ever.
You were born and then you read The Final Empire.
Like, yeah, I mean, if you've never read a book before, I wouldn't start with The Final Empire necessarily. But with my first Sanderson book, and I was like reading it mostly when I was commuting, and so I was getting into that last like 20% whilst I was traveling for work to see a client, and I had to like stop, see the client, and then I was like reading it on the bus on the way home, like, oh, what the
I could never.
It was really bad. It was really, really bad.
I can only imagine.
So don't do that.
No,
don't.
Be at home, be alone, have everything you need around you. You won't be able to put it down. Not even to go to the bathroom. Maybe you should just sit on the bathroom, on the toilet, and just read the last 20%, just in case. Just in case. Because, yeah, the ending. I wasn't expecting that kind of ending, and so much action, so much everything building, and then whoosh, it's like what you said. You're just like, let's go, and you feel a void inside when you're done.
Yeah. I think the best one or worst one, depending on how you look at it, is The Way of Kings. The way that book ends, I was just, oh my God, I think I stayed up till about 2 or 3 a.m. finishing that book, because it got to like the 300 pages left mark, and I was like, I can't stop reading. I've got to know.
This is such a Sanderson fan thing. There was only 300 pages left, so I
like a whole book. Yeah.
I did what you just said happened to me with The Hero of Ages. So I broke my leg in the beginning of 2020, and yeah, it was a great year. And so I was bedridden, and so I was like, hey, might as well just read, the trilogy. And when I finished Well of Ascension, my husband was doing singing lessons, and then I was like, you need to pause your singing lesson, you need to go downstairs, and you need to grab me The Hero of Ages, because I cannot continue. So he paused. He was so nice. He went down, came back up, because broken leg, I couldn't do it myself. And then I read The Hero of Ages, and I just couldn't stop. I was just reading, and he's like, we should go to bed. I'm like, no, I'm finishing this. And he saw what I had left. He's like, but you have like 200 pages left. I was like, I know. Fine. 2 in the morning, I'm done. And then I just cried, and I sat there petting my cat, like the void.
Yeah.
So if you want to feel emotion, if you want to feel these smiles that we have on our faces, and yet feel the emptiness inside, welcome to the Cosmere. And to Brandon Sanderson.
If you want to become a Sanderson character, read the Cosmere.
You'll be just as damaged by the end.
Yeah. We're not trying to put you off. We're joking. Well, we're mostly joking.
We're totally fine. We're laughing. We're happy human beings. Oh man.
Oh, dear.
I think this is a wonderful note to end this on. Oh. Well, thank you so much, Sophia, for coming on the channel today and for letting me pick your brain with all these questions. I'm sure I will try to get you on again to talk about either the books or characters or any specific types of the magic. So thank you so much again for coming. And I will leave, of course, Sophia's channel link down below. You need to check out because you saw she's a lovely human being and I just love her content. And she has very creative videos and vlogs. So
thank you.
And you read a lot. Every time I watch your vlog, I'm like, I'm now reading this and this and this and this. I'm like, how?
I'm trying to slow down a bit, but I just can't help myself.
You know what? One day you'll be looking back on this time like, oh, I miss being able to read so much. So enjoy it.
Yep, for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Like I said, I've been following you for a long time, and this was so cool when you agreed to come on. I was so happy. Like a little fangirl, you know. Yay, Sophia! So thank you again so much, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And I will see you hopefully soon here on the channel, and hopefully we'll see you in my next video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!